Welcome to Resisting the Dragon's Beast. We took last week off because Peter couldn't talk, right, Peter?
Yeah, yeah. I had a bit of a nasty cough that kind of snowballed and hung on for a long time, and we're thankfully back to mostly normal.
How was preaching then?
By like Wednesday or Thursday, I knew that it wasn't getting better very quickly, and it was basically doing whatever I could to try to be able to be ready for Sunday. So, go over to the Y, sit in the nice hot sauna for a while, and make sure you have a nap and have a tea with some lemon in it, clear out the throat. And I was able to talk for Sunday, and not be an absolute mess. So in that regard, it worked out all right.
All right. Well, since Peter got his voice back, he's going to do most of the talking in this episode because he's taking the lead on this one. He gave us his top 10
Oh
list
boy.
of the things that he wants to talk about, and then I'm going to react to the things that he brings up. So go for it, Peter.
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna dive right in, and I know I've got something to say about each of these, and there's probably a lot more that could be said about all of them, and I wonder, to what degree, this is primarily about politics. I don't think it is, because I think that's where also, Mike having a little bit of commentary, kind of rounds it out to say, well, we are citizens at this time and at this place, and these are some things that we ought to have in mind. So we'll just dive right in with the top 10 plus one as I've got it written down. I didn't change the order at all.
Okay.
So top 10, number 10. I guess so we count down on these. Number 10, taking this the election of Donald Trump and the rest of the Republicans in a landslide, fairly close. Taking this as a sign from God or a stamp of approval on my party.
All right. Well, what do you have to say about that? Where are you thinking that should go? And then I'll
Um,
respond.
I think there is a tendency to over spiritualize politics, and while we can also say, well, generally I prefer at least a party who acknowledges that there are moral realities and natural realities. At the same time, I don't put my faith and my trust in the Republican Party by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. An example of that might be uh, think of what had happened uh, just recently. You know, because if, say, President Trump had won 4 years ago, and I don't think he would have been as effective in his second term. Usually, you're not as effective. And he admitted in different places, especially he's talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast, which has been listened to like 40 million people. And he talked about how, being an outsider in that first election, he didn't know whom to appoint in different positions and so forth. He talked about how uh, he liked business leaders, but business leaders don't know how to do politics. And the problem is with politicians, they know how to do politics, but they've probably been in there for so long. And so he may not have been as effective. And so trying to get some of these outsiders in was a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it is kind of interesting to look at some of the video of him talking before he was took office the first time versus the way that he's talking now. Even in like the Al Smith banquet, where he really ripped on Hillary the first time through. And then the second time when he was him and Kamala didn't show up, and it was absolutely hilarious. Like on a personal level, he was hilarious, but he also showed a little bit more understanding of the room and understanding of the context.
Yeah, I think there's a little more restraint this time. You're not seeing all the mean tweets and
Yeah,
so forth. Yeah.
yeah, believe it or not, usually those two things we don't pair together. Um, let's see, top
Well,
10. The
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, before you go on there too, I like you said with the Republicans, don't put your faith in say Republicans if that's your party. As some commentators have said, yeah, don't just wait for the Republicans to screw this up. Uh, but think of just what's happened this past week. That Delaware elected their first so-called transgender person to Congress. Well, so now you've got a Republican lady who has come out very strongly to present a bill to say that this dude in women's clothing needs to use men's bathrooms. But again, think of where we would have been just a few years ago without allowing President Biden and Kamala Harris and so forth and everything to go so woke the last 4 years with DEI and so forth. The Republicans would have caved. Now they're they've got, it seems like, a mandate from over half of the American public, and especially when you look at the election map, that President Trump carried everything except for just a handful of states. So it seems to be
Hmm.
there is this mandate for the Republicans. Yeah, be strong, be moral. And so there are very few Democrats that are supporting this dude in drag. And this guy even said he's going to use the men's bathroom. He's going to follow. And then uh, this lady that has brought forth this case said recently she's not going to just do it just for Congress. She's going to make sure that this goes for every federal building. So I just bring that up as we have to hold
That's awesome.
our congressmen, congress ladies, uh, accountable and say, we elected you here for morality, not for Christianity. There's a difference, but to be moral. So be moral. We are behind you. And again, I don't think that this would have happened 4 years ago if Trump would have been elected in subsequent terms. But I think this is
Hmm.
for us to realize, hey, this is how bad it got. We need some normality back in politics.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the kind of an interesting part, where Kamala Harris, her basic platform was on transgenderism and abortion.
Hmm.
And the only group that she really carried when we talked about like segments of society, were like college educated women, primarily college educated white women. And everybody else kind of pushed back. And it's not long after the election that you have members of Congress taking their pronouns out of their official Twitter accounts. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's noteworthy. And Ben Shapiro made the note already like 3 months ago on a podcast, the Modern Wisdom podcast. Just fantastic. He just riffs at Ben Shapiro speed for like 2.5 hours. I had to slow it
Yeah.
down, right?
Oh, you did? That's hilarious.
But he, yeah, I did. And he talked about the idea that in culture we are past peak wokeism, that we've passed the peak of wokeism, at least in culture. And he thought that we haven't quite reached the peak in our college campuses and academia yet, but that by and large, people in society are not wanting to play the game of putting up with people who are like, oh, here are my pronouns, and this is who I actually am inside. And that, I mean, that is encouraging. And I don't know if you would have that sort of a bill in Congress if the other candidate were poised to be taking the oath of office.
Yeah. And since you brought up the college educated women, this is something I've been thinking about and probably, Lord willing, give a presentation on at some point, like at a men's conference, is, the theme of preaching politics as outreach. And it's specifically supposed to be, a title that's going to grab people's attention. It's clickbait. I understand that. But two things is not politics as in Democrats and Republicans or right or left, but just uh, uh, morality, civil government. How are we involved in civil
Mhm.
government? Because uh, I've got some young people that are in my adult confirmation class online. They want to talk politics and so forth. They want to talk all those kinds of things, and that's fantastic. I'm not afraid to talk about those things with them and just applying God's word. But young men are becoming more conservative, and so we have conservative principles. Is our Christianity with what we would say conservatism in America that lends itself to what men are looking for. They are looking for uh, men as leaders, and we have that in our church body. We should be trumpeting that and telling that. But then also, you pay attention that women, young women, are becoming more liberal. the opposite of men. More men are coming to church than we've seen before. Women are staying away from church. And that's a Christian value too, the opposite way, in that they have made politics their religion. And so now we have, when we can use our Christianity and talk to two different groups of people in how Christianity applies to politics. One, young men with conservative values, and another one applying Christianity to the women with their liberal values. And very different message to both people, but we can use what you would term politics to apply to both of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was I don't know if that was that same podcast or a different one, asking the question, maybe it was Joe Rogan, I don't know, asking the question, why are young men becoming increasingly conservative? And the answer I thought was pretty good, where they said basically, at every other point in culture, we've been saying that men are the problem. Men are the problem. It's toxic masculinity. You can't be here. You being pushed out of these segments of society and culture, and saying that you're the reason why, and that in a way, conservatism, and that kind of a mindset was the only place that was open and welcomed them, which I think is noteworthy. In one degree, there's also that aspect of saying, as a church, we are a conservative church body. We are scripturally conservative, which means that we hold to the text. And it's not foolish, I don't think, to say, we don't have to convert the entire city. Let's find, can you find two other people who think like you, who are looking for a solid framework for life, some truth and some values, and invite that? Can you invite them to church? I mean, they already think like you. They already take some things, document seriously. Maybe it's the Constitution, maybe it's the Bible, maybe it's all the above, and to say, well, it's not a bad thing to want to collect people who are already thinking like that, like us already.
Yeah, because there are those in our culture that are you know, so opposed to what we believe and so forth. And so you think of, say, like men. Too often we shy away from this as Christians of Ephesians 5, of wives submit to your husbands as Lord. And oh my goodness. And yet that's what young men are looking for. Like you said, that whole preaching in our culture of toxic masculinity, and they say, no, we're going to preach and teach men as good Christ-like leaders. And then women, especially, they're going to be opposed to the women submitting. And then we teach them, okay, this is what it really means, that it's men that are the leaders who are serving you, not as a servant, but as a humble Christ-like leader. Everything, you're tired right now. You're worn out because our world is lying to you. They're telling you that you can have everything in the world, and you can't. You can't do it all. Men can't either. We need each other. So it's preaching that conservative Christianity of men as leaders, women as submissive helpers. And what does that mean in our culture? And then drawing all these young men and women into our churches.
Definitely. Then I had a series of probably 5 or 6 things that started with I, and
Yes.
with some of these might be fairly quick. My next one, number 9, was the question of indictment. That I haven't followed up on this since I first wrote this list 2 weeks ago. But if President Trump is still under indictment from the state of New York, is the state of New York able to bring charges against him? Or will those charges be dropped? Or will we all just say, well, we should have done that in the first place? I think that at the very least is worth tucking in the back of the mind. I don't know if there's the same, I'm a little bit unplugged. I don't know if there's the same level of vitriol and hatred against Donald Trump, or if it's now just one side basically saying, "Oh no, the end is near, and it's going to be a dictatorship, and all of our rights are going to be stripped away," and to what degree that might play into the next coming months.
Yeah, I think I've heard that that case in New York has been dropped, or it will be dropped. That there's really no energy now uh, to bring this forward. Uh, And and then it's kind of funny that people have said, well, but even if he's indicted on this, that he could just pardon himself. It's never been done before, and so can you do that? But it is interesting that if the left believes that President Trump had really done all of these crimes, then they really should keep going after him. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, in this too, in that, uh, there were two, I think it's MSNBC hosts that recently went down to Mar-a-Lago, where Trump's home is in Florida, and met with him. And they've been vilified by people both on the left and right because they had said, the last few weeks of the election, they called Trump literally Hitler. Okay, they said that his rally in New York City was, like a Nazi rally. And so now these people are going down to have brunch with President Trump, and they're saying, we still disagree on some things, but at least we're going to be cordial. And then again, they're being vilified as, how are you being cordial with literally Hitler? So either what you were saying before was not true, or you didn't believe it. Because if he's literally Hitler, or if he's literally a lawbreaker, then we should still be going after him. We should still be opposing him and so forth. And if they're not doing it, yeah, they were either lying or they didn't believe it.
Yeah. Kind of the interesting thing, Michael Bain he's been a popular writer and commentator on a variety of things. I think he got his start writing about the music industry. Anyway, he brought up this idea of chumming the waters, and I
Mm.
think this is kind of what happened the last couple of months before the election with two separate attempts on Trump's safety and life. Chumming the waters. If you've ever seen Jaws, you dump chum in the water, and then eventually, yeah, good movie. We'll both agree on that one. Then eventually, you're going to bring the beast up from down below,
Yeah,
and
you and then
using.
you're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where's Steve McQueen when you need him? Um, and or the other guy, Mr. Holland's Opus, Richard Dreyfuss. That
Yes.
that was it.
Yeah, Steve McQueen was not in Jaws.
I realized that. I was
Okay.
sick. All right.
Yes.
So then, this idea of chumming the waters, that if you keep saying it, he is literally Hitler, literally Hitler. And what is the I see this in even sometimes, like when we have guest preachers or something, the obsession with talking about World War II, and the Holocaust, like this extremely intense emotional event that is a major part of history for the majority of people who are sitting in the pews. We grew up hearing the stories, growing up next to World War II veterans, and all that rhetoric where the term doesn't mean the actual term. Like they don't actually mean that this man with hair and orange food or whatever his skin
Yeah.
coloration. Um, they don't actually mean that man is growing a mustache and becoming Chancellor of Germany and marching people off to the gas chambers. But when they say that, what it is trying to like chum the waters, which is basically getting people to think this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, and eventually you're going to call up the crazies. You're going to call up those who really believe that they are doing a service by getting rid of that person, and I think that actually is kind of what happened this past summer with the attempt in Pennsylvania, and then later on the attempt when he was golfing. And it was so ham-handed that it's like, yeah, this person is obviously not in his right mind. But at what point can we say that our terminology has really implanted the idea in somebody else's mind? They have the responsibility for it, yes. But at the same time, well, let's think about the way we talk about this because we don't actually mean it. Then, Joe Biden went to jokingly put on a MAGA hat if you thought Donald Trump was literally Hitler, like
Yeah.
literally, right?
Yeah. And that goes for those on the right too, that maybe the rhetoric isn't quite as strong, but it can still be pretty awful. And so
Mhm.
the difficulty is to be able to speak the truth, speak the truth in love, to be able to say, yeah, this is wrong. That these policies that this party and these politicians are proposing, uh, that this is ungodly, and to say it like that, and to not have ad hominem attacks, is not to attack the person. That's what those were with Trump and so forth, or even Trump calling Harris dumb and so forth. Is we can say, all right, she's not very good at speaking. Okay, you can say that, people can understand it, and you can say it in a way that is truthful and yet not denigrating. But so much of politics has become that way. And so we as Christians, and that's why I think a lot of Christians don't want to get involved in politics because they don't want to get dirty. Well, that's just, I think that's being pious, saying I'm not going to get dirty with this, so I'm just going to stay. No, it's going to get dirty. The left-hand kingdom of Christ is dirty. It is the church militant. We are at war, and we are part of the left-hand kingdom. We need to be involved in these things, and it's going to be dirty, but that doesn't mean the dirt has to be coming from our mouths, and we don't need to be slinging the dirt at other people. We need to be innocent as doves. At the same time, we're speaking wise words like a serpent.
Yeah, definitely. And so the next one is interest.
Oh, you missed
And
impeachment.
yeah, I skipped over impeachment.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think in the impeachment, there's a question, there's a little bit of a question as to whether the Senate can pick up the recommendation that they did not pursue previously, about impeaching Donald Trump for something that he had done previously while in office. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I didn't research that one enough to speak intelligently about it, and so I skipped it.
Fantastic. I'm skipping it then too.
Excellent. Next one would be interest, and this one's kind of interesting. Gets into the idea of what we call modern monetary theory, that the U.S. debt is far larger than the annual revenue of the U.S. federal government, and it's actually larger than our gross domestic product. And sometime over the next couple of years, I believe, if I'm remembering the terminology correctly, the interest on the debt is actually going to succeed or surpass all of our annual revenue total, which is kind of a big deal. And so I don't know, about 15 years ago, I think it was during the Obama administration, right around the time of I don't know, I forget exactly when it was, proposed the idea of what we call modern monetary theory, that debt doesn't really matter, and that what really matters is what they call velocity of money. So as long as the money is moving around quickly enough, where the same dollar that gets paid to somebody in their paycheck then gets spent at the store, then gets reinvested, and instead of being caught up in infrastructure or caught up in capital improvements, then that money is moving around. And modern monetary theory also proposes that debt doesn't really matter because we say it doesn't matter. That's probably a gross oversimplification. If you have a degree in economics or something like that, maybe we can host you as a special guest. And the reason that it's concerning is because this is fairly uncharted territory for a modern developed nation like ours. We've only seen something like this in smaller areas like Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Weimar Germany in the late 1920s into the 1930s. And so in that sense, it is a little bit of an open question. Like the presidential candidates and parties are basically playing hot potato. Like who's going to be holding this when the numbers change? Who's going to be holding this when all of a sudden we think it's going to work this way, but we can't have a guarantee of that. And if you really want to dive down the rabbit hole, then the only thing that really provides value to our money is the fact that oil is traded in US dollars. So as long as oil is being used and as long as oil is being pumped, then the value of the US dollar has inherent value for as much oil as you can pull out of the ground. And then that value of the US dollar is backed up by the power of the US military. And so I think that one is kind of an interesting one that most people, I've just heard, a couple different podcasts about it over the last couple of weeks. Most people aren't particularly aware of it, and I won't say that U.S. Budgets on a scale of our federal government is the exact same thing as budgets on the scale of running your home, because you're at your home, you can't run a continual deficit in your home budget. But I do think that would be something noteworthy here in the next Trump administration.
Exactly. And to understand that with Trump, he raised the national debt the last time he was in office. Okay, so to understand that, though there may be some moral and conservative principles there, he was not conservative in spending. So to understand that, hey, we got to hold him accountable and his administration accountable in getting down this debt. And it's going to be painful. No one likes to pay down their debt, pay their mortgage off, and so forth, cut up their credit cards. Uh, Budgets, though, for me are difficult, Peter. I have to deal with budgets for the Board for Missions, and I had an email last week from one of the ladies in the Board for Missions office, and she said, "Al, I think people are going to be really excited about these new home missions budgets we're going to be sending out soon." And I replied, "I'm as excited about budgets as I am about eating vegetables." And she wrote back, LOL. I literally laughed out loud in my desk. So, yeah, budgets are not fun. But I am very excited about some of the picks that President Trump has in place. And you and I, 2 weeks ago, were kind of guessing at what some of those might be. One that probably I'm most favorite is the DOGE, the Doge. That's Musk, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy. The Doge, it stands for the Department of Government Efficiency, although I think it should be the Department of Getting Rid of Everything.
Yes.
Just cut things. And what's interesting too is I read an article yesterday, and then I listened to a 3-minute clip of Vivek on YouTube. I didn't know he had a podcast on YouTube, but what he's going to be doing is ending that one podcast, and he and Musk are going to be having a podcast every week, or every so often at least, where they're going to talk about and even take suggestions from the American public on what do we think needs to get rid of.
Mhm.
And we talk about getting rid of things because we need to cut down on the amount of government jobs and red tape and so forth. If you ever had to try and build anything in your house or to put up a shed, and just all the red tape we have to go through, all the forms and permits we need to build on our own land. Okay, that's what they're trying to get rid of. Get rid of all of those things. Because I read another article that this week that said that all of the different red tape and everything that we have to go through for government costs the American public $15,000 a year. Imagine what you would be able to do with 15,000 extra dollars each year, getting rid of these things. But we have to get rid of these things and then stop spending money as a government to be able to bring that deficit down, because it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and that's the other thing when we talk about like budget cuts in the federal government. They'll say we cut our budget for 2025, we cut it by 10%. They don't mean they actually cut their budget from 100% down to 90%. They mean that there was a 30% increase, and instead of a 30% increase, they're only going to do a 20% increase. And so therefore it is a 10% budget cut. And we talked about last time, I chatted with somebody, and I'm also in favor of getting rid of the IRS and do all the investigation, take that and merge it with the Secret Service, because the Secret Service has two things. They take care of counterfeit money, and they protect people of interest like our president, and just let the Secret Service protect the president. And it's obviously there are many more and smarter ideas than that, but I think efficiency is one thing, and also that might open up the door to a number of challenges. This will be an interesting one in the next cycle of Supreme Court cases. If there are any particular challenges about the 10th Amendment, where the 10th Amendment says that the powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the state governments. And yet, especially since the 1930s and some of the programs that FDR brought into place, the federal government has given itself the right to take on a number of other responsibilities that aren't really theirs to begin with. Prime example of that in the news right now would probably be the Department of Education, which is delegated to the states, delegated to the individual county level. And then Jimmy Carter is like, oh, we need a Department of Education because we're doing too well compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and Department of Education, if you are a World Wrestling Entertainment fan, WWE, what's kind of funny is that you've got Linda McMahon. Uh, uh, Mr. McMahon was the owner and CEO of WWE, and Linda McMahon is his wife, estranged wife, but how she is now the head of the Department of Education, and then the guy who used to have be the wrestler Kane, that they're showing videos of him doing a tombstone on Linda McMahon, but he is a Republican politician, I think governor of a state, or at least I think he's a mayor. He's a mayor of a town. That's what it is. But it's just kind of funny. And hopefully,
Mhm.
Linda McMahon does not have her job very long because President Trump has said that he wants to get rid of the federal Department of Education and make it go back to the states the way it had been before the 1970s. Uh, because it's bureaucracy. That's what we're talking about, is getting rid of all of these levels of bureaucracy that when President Trump had talked about, again, with his uh, term as president, he wanted to say, drain the swamp. But he didn't know how to do that. Now I think he's realized how to do that. And the swamp isn't just the elected officials, it's all of these unelected officials, all of these bureaucracies that are there in place, and they're there no matter who is president, who's
Mhm.
in Congress. It doesn't matter to them whether they have Republicans or Democrats, right or left. They're there, they're entrenched. They are oftentimes the one, it seems, to have the real power. Some might call it the dark state. That might seem more conspiracy theories and so forth. But but to think about it, if president is only there for 48 years. Certain congressmen and congresswomen might be there for a while. Uh, but these people can be there for, 30, 40 years. You can get a lot done in 30 to 40 years. And you and I, as American citizens, have no say in them. And a lot of times the politicians don't, the government leaders. And so that's what I'm really hopeful with President Trump. And, if Republicans actually do stuff to drain that swamp, get rid of these bureaucracies.
Yeah, definitely. And even as a Christian citizen, that is a matter of stewardship that we want to manage our own resources well, and also the resources of our country together. And you see the headlines about how many federal workers are going to lose their jobs. That doesn't, I mean, I feel for those people in one degree. In another sense, I really appreciate the idea that we ought to think carefully about what we actually want our government to be doing, because a bureaucracy will only continue to feed itself. That's the way that it works. It's not going to function for the good of any organization outside of, or any organism outside of itself, that the bureaucracy becomes an organism in and of itself.
Yep.
Next one I had, so this would be 1, 10, 9, 8, 7,
Inflation.
6. Inflation, yeah, I should mark these off. Inflation, talking about one of the big drivers of inflation, and my understanding of it was printing a whole bunch of money during COVID, and all of a sudden we inflated the amount of money that is in circulation. And of course, there's going to be that money is going to be chasing more product, and so there's more money, and the supply of the product has not increased. So more dollars chasing the same or fewer products. And that question of inflation, in one degree, it's not a bad thing if you have a debt, especially a debt at a fixed income rate like a mortgage. Inflation actually works in your favor, and it's also not a bad thing if the salary or the paychecks of the people tend to keep up with being able to provide for needs. But where it really becomes an issue is when inflation vastly outpaces the growth of income, and the only lever that the federal government really has that they use regularly is the printing of money on one side and interest rates on the other side. And you probably know that from relatively recent history, some of the interest rates during the Carter administration as an attempt to curb inflation, to incentivize taking money out of the system. And so inflation, I think that's going to be a bigger question. And maybe I'll just toss it back to you because I could talk about that for another 20 minutes, maybe.
Well, that's good because I couldn't. What I can talk about is both with the national interest rate that we were talking about before, and then here with inflation is I look at in our church body that we have calls for, say, pastors, and those are the ones I pay attention to, and we're at a historic low of pastors accepting calls and moving elsewhere. It's like 11%. So, and I think one of the reasons why pastors are not accepting calls is it's expensive, because now you have to sell your house and buy elsewhere. So, for example, if I was able to get my house, I was blessed, it'd be about 12, 13 years ago to get my house at a, say, 3% interest rate for 15 years. Okay, it's almost paid off. God's blessed us. But then to say, all right, now we're going to take a call elsewhere, and I'm going to have to take a 30-year mortgage and at 6 or 7%. The same with churches. Years ago when interest rates were low. Now to try and do our new missions, and this is one of the reasons why when we proposed 2 years ago to start 100 new missions in 10 years, it's really difficult. That was before all this inflation hit. It's really difficult to start 10 new missions because before maybe a mission might be $1 million. Now with inflation, it's 1.75 million, because it's so much more expensive to buy land and to build and so forth than it was just a few years ago. So these are real life effects on every person. But as we're talking about this with the church, real life effects on your pastors and on your churches.
Yeah, and we even see it in our church budgets with the cost of health insurance, and I had a couple conversations now on the topic of health insurance and the salary matrix, which you can read about that as much as you want as well. But I think where I would kind of add on to this is inflation kind of squeezing everybody. Maybe it teaches us again, give us this day our daily bread. And in a way that we can't avoid the lesson that we ought to have learned from that. But it also opens up the door for more deeds of mercy by the Christian church. Whether that means registering and becoming your own food bank so that the church is able to collect food donations from companies that can't sell it in the same way, or churches can turn, instead of like a can of beans costing 39 cents, then they can get it for 9 cents. Things like that food banks have the ability to do. Or one thing like we're doing with a little bit of extra land that we have here. We were blessed with a donation of a plot that was directly adjacent to ours. And we've took the time in the spring to do some planting And so we're going to have a community forest garden. And so over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, the trees and the bushes and shrubs that we planted will be bearing fruit over the course of about 6 or 7 months of the year, as well as providing space for people to have their own plot of ground where they can grow their own vegetables, or we can just plant a bunch and then make it available to people within our church. And then, my hope is that we can also have a few chickens out there, and with about a dozen chickens, that would give us potentially, if you have 12 chickens, that's potentially what, 600. Well, 12 times 5. I can't do the math. 12 times 6. So that's like that. Let's say that's about 6 dozen, 6 dozen eggs a week that we would be able to share with members of our own congregation and members of our community, and to be able to say, we don't just care about you and care about seeing you in heaven, and we care about you not so that we're just gonna give you a gift card to the grocery store that has raised its prices 40%. But we care about you in a tangible way to say, we've thought about this and we want to help provide food for your table directly.
Yeah, and with that, we just did this at our church. My daughter and a friend of hers from Wisconsin Lutheran College in Milwaukee, WLC, had organized doing a food drive in our community. So last week, we went and put flyers on about 600 doors, and then letting them know that we would be coming the following Saturday to collect food. And we had a bunch of teens that were helping, and they were kind of disappointed. There were a lot of people not home. They weren't getting a lot of food. Uh, and yet, I took the food yesterday to two places that my daughter Belle had contacted, and one was the Racine Food Bank, and the other was the Veterans Home on the north side of Racine. And it didn't seem like we had a lot, but total we had collected over 600 pounds of food in 4 hours. That's a lot of food.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah. But those are the kinds of things that I encourage our churches to do. It is really hard to go canvassing. I know I've done a lot of canvassing to go and just talk to people. People don't want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to you about the church and so forth. But this opens doors, literally opens doors for them to know that you do care because you're collecting food for those who are less fortunate. And then, Lord willing, then you can have a spiritual conversation. You can give them, like we did, invite to our Christmas services and things like that. But they have to know you care. And there's an opportunity when you see that people are hurting, because inflation does hurt people, that they can't afford food, and then go, all right, well, we're hurting in the church too. So maybe we can't do all the programs that we would like to do as a church. Hey, that's okay. Maybe let's spend our money and go buy groceries and gift cards and help a few people out in our community. And that is the way for us to, as my daughter and her friend Sophia, or Sophie, that they chose Matthew 25 as their key verses for this, where Jesus says, when you went and fed others, you fed me. And so the theme of theirs was feeding Jesus, which I thought was pretty cool. And
Yeah, that
that's
is.
the way that when we're struggling, when people in our community are struggling, like you said, Peter, we as Christians are called to step up as sanctified saints.
Next one I had was integrity. This may have touched a little bit on it, on like the integrity of election results, but I think it's more so about integrity of the people who inhabit the office. Not that I think very many of our presidents have been men of integrity, just that the stories were well hidden enough from the public eye at the time. Although I'm sure we had some that were good. But the hope that they can act in a way that is balanced and demonstrates a respect for common morality and for natural law, and that sort of integrity is something that we always pray for and probably ought to pray more for.
Yeah, when it comes to integrity, you can look at people and what is their view on the things that we've talked about, like inflation and interest and programs, the military and so forth. Those are all good. my viewpoint is always one thing. Integrity is what is your view on the unborn? Are you going to protect life? If you're going to protect life, I'm going to listen to what else you say. No, if you have no respect and you're not going to be protecting the life of the unborn, I don't care if I agree with you on everything else, on a strong military, on low taxes, on cutting everything in the government. I don't trust you because you do not have the integrity to protect the innocent. Okay,
Mhm.
you're off the table. I can't believe you because uh, you're not protecting those whom God has said to protect, the little children. So that's my view on
Definitely.
integrity, that one issue above everything else. And you brought this up before. Uh, Kamala Harris made that one of her keys of the election. They thought that they could win the election based on abortion. And in America, it's split. It's 50-50. Even you saw Trump and Vance, they softened their stance on abortion, which I didn't like, but I understand as a politician, they've got to get elected. Then
Mhm.
once you get elected, then you can try and work on getting federal judges, because that's the big thing of getting federal judges, getting Supreme Court judges and so forth that are strong on abortion and so forth, and then bringing it to uh, there's been abortion ballots that pro-life have been bringing to states and so forth. Like Florida had one that passed. But I think I listened to the statistics like this most recently, pro-lifers have lost. Like, uh, they've been beaten 14 times and only won like three. So it's not a good track record. And part of it is because the other side, that's the pro-abortion side, they have a lot more money. And so, to be pro-life, we need to be supporting these pro-life initiatives and so forth. But it comes down to knowing about them, but also making sure we get men and women in place to have that integrity, those moral values.
Definitely. That was good. That was good.
Uh,
Next one I hit. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm wondering, Peter, if we want to just do those top five or the
Yeah.
bottom five and then save the next five for next time.
Yeah. The next five are doozies. If you thought the first five were good, the next
Do
five
you
are
want to
better.
do you want to
Yeah, we
give
can
them
save it
out
for
so
next
they
time. We will talk about foreign policy, President Trump as a populist candidate, the concept of honor and respect for the elected, the bigger question of language and language which defines the pattern of culture. And then finally, the need within our U.S. Constitution to have a framework of morality, because that is one of the bigger questions. And there are some really smart atheists who are asking the question, asking that similar question, that if we are going to toss out religion, which in one sense has codified and brought together a common basis for morality. If we're going to toss out religion entirely or just Christianity, what are we going to have that will unite us in a way that we can all speak a common language about the need for morality? Anyway, we'll save that one for the next time.
All right, well, fantastic. And then we look forward to seeing you all soon. I'm not sure how soon because, I don't know if this is a busy time of the season for you, Peter.
Always. Like October through December, through Christmas is yeah.
Yeah, so, Peter's gonna be preaching every single Sunday and then Thanksgiving and midweek Advent and so forth. I get off every other week now, so I'm not like a real pastor anymore.
I didn't say that. I didn't say
Yeah,
that.
that's all right. I said it. So, all right. Well, Lord's blessings and have a blessed Thanksgiving, and we plan to see you all soon.